Today we're going to be covering the new Ice Barrier archetype, which is the new structure deck. And we got about 3 different monsters, and we're just going to cover what they do and what I actually think of them. First card is Trishula Sub-Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. It's a Water Dragon Synchro, level 11 with 2,700 attack and 2,000 defense. It's basically an upgrade of the original Trishula, as that I think is a level 9. This requires a tuner plus 2 or more non-tuner monsters. You can only use this card's name second effect once per turn. 1. When this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. And 2. If the synchro summoned card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your extra deck or graveyard, but its attack becomes 3,000. Then if your opponent controls any face-up monsters, halve their attacks and negate their effects. So I think this card is brilliant as an upgrade to Trishula. For starters, yes, it does have the same attack and defense lineup as the original. I don't think they wanted to make it that broken. They don't want, some of the Ice Barrier cards have been known to do loops and various effects, which mean that they've been banned in the past. You've got a yugioh, which can actually return cards. You also have the dragon card as well that can do this, which had to get an errata in order for it to be unbanned. The first effect is not too bad, actually being able to banish 3 cards your opponent controls. So that's anything they have on their field that can be set face-up cards, whichever you have. And it could be a mixture of either monsters, spell, or traps. So you've got options there. I would say this is not as good as the original Trishula, for the reason that that actually takes something from the field, the hand, and the graveyard and banishes them. This just banishes from the field. So if your opponent has a very weak board, it's not great to bring this out. And there can be situations where actually bringing out the original Trishula is much better than this. I would say this is much better when you think of if you're late in a later game state and your opponent is really pressing you hard. That's when this card has its effect at its best. The second part of the effect actually is quite good, because this is if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card. So any form of destruction is viable, monster, spell, or trap. So long as it's destroyed, this effect will trigger. And it lets you bring out your original Trishula. The thing is that it comes from your extra deck. I think that means it can, I'm not sure, but I think it can trigger its effect when it's summoned this way. So actually you can get multiple disruptions on board at the same time. And of course, boosting its attack to 3,300, even though this is only 600 points, means that it gives it a little bit more force to it. It also acts a bit like it's similar to Lost Wind, that you can actually cut your opponent's attack in half and also negate it. So anything left over from the onslaught that you've provided will be much weaker and could be easily run over. And this card is definitely going to be seeing some play. The only problem I have is I wish it had a little bit stronger of a stat lineup. And of course, it being a level 11 means it's going to take a little bit longer to either summon into, or to maybe you can summon it off the original Trishula, considering that once it's used its effect, it's no longer necessary to keep on the field. The next card is Mirror Master of Ice Barrier. This is a water spellcaster effect, level 4 monster, with 1,700 attack and 1,000 defense. You can only use this card's name's second and third effects once per turn each. 1. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon. 2. You can discard 1 card, special summon 1 Ice Barrier tuner monster from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except water monsters. And 3, if you were to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect by sending a card from the hand to the graveyard, or discarding, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead of one of those cards. So this card is quite decent for what it does. It does have 1700 attack, so it's a decent level 4 to summon onto the field regardless. This does stun your opponent. There are a few monsters out there. I think there's like the Fox one, which is a level 3, which actually prevents certain monsters from attacking. So that there are limitations and restrictions that the ice barriers put on your opponent. There's also the Spirit monster one, which can return itself and an opponent's monster to the hand, which means you're constantly spinning back maybe their extra deck monsters that they're putting some effort and resources into summoning to begin with. The thing about this is it locks your opponent out of tribute summoning. This might not seem like that big of a deal, but depending on what your opponent is playing, this can be quite deadly. Say against monarchs, various other tribute summon based decks, this will be a key card for as a counter to. The second part of the effect actually enables you to summon into an Ice Barrier Tuner monster, which essentially means you're able to, go into some of your synchro monsters. Bryonic is a good example. I mean, all you need is a level 2 Ice Barrier, and that's it. You get your Bryonic at. You could get your Trishula if you've already got, say, another monster on the field, and then you're able to just get your Tuner to go into your level 9. And it's a little bit more versatile because it, even from the point of view, it gives you a little bit more field presence. If you want to choose to do something in later on, there are a couple of higher level monsters. There's like the general one who is like 2,700 attack. He can search for other cards. There's also one that limits your opponent from activating spell or traps. They can only activate one per turn, I think. And there's other ones as well, which are level 6 that I can't think of on the top of my head. And the third effect, if you would activate an Ice Barrier effect, you can use this as basically part of the cost or the entire cost if necessary. And that means even in the graveyard, it has some usage, so it's not just synchro summon it away and that's it, you're done. It has some staying power to it. The final card, I think this is probably the best out of them, and I would say this from the point of view that if you aren't running at least 2 of these, I mean, these are very versatile. I've read the effect before, and I think this is massively key to what they needed. This is Frost Spirit of the Ice Barrier. It's a Water Sea Serpent Tuner effect monster. It's a level 1 with 400 attack and 200 defense. You can only use this card's name's second effect once per turn. 1, while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. And 2, during your main phase, you can send 1 level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, this card's level becomes the sent monster's level until the end of this turn. So the first effect, this is not what we're really here for. It's just a generic 500 attack and defense loss whilst you have another Ice Barrier. The stat reduction is so low it's not really going to make a difference. If it had been per other Ice Barrier monster you had on the field, maybe I could see that part of the effect being useful, but it's actually the fact that it's a tuner and it can actually manipulate its own level, which makes it a lot better. Being able to do this means you can go into some of your other synchro monsters much easier. Maybe you don't have the required levels, and to actually adjust this card's level means you can go into your Bryonic, your Duelon, whichever you want. And also actually sending some of the Ice Barriers from the deck to the graveyard means you have much easier access to bringing those from the graveyard back onto the field, as opposed to trying to wait until you search or draw into these cards, which can be a long drawn-out process. So what do you think of these cards? Personally, from my point of view, I know these are only the introductory cards and there are more cards to come for the structure deck, but it gives me a lot of hope. When I saw the Charmer support, I was massively disappointed. I didn't think Konami really took that one seriously, and I thought it was a bit of a joke, to be honest. This I'm a lot more hopeful for because they look very important to the deck and they actually modernize it. Whatever you think, leave your comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.